Raising the minimum wage to the living wage will lift American workers out of poverty and will stimulate the U.S. economy into a new age of prosperity. Objection! Raising the minimum wage will lead to out-of-control unemployment and inflation, immediately tanking a U.S. economy exposed to mechanization and unfair global economic boundary conditions. These extreme endpoints have defined the public debate on raising the minimum wage, yet they both fail to fully interrogate the issue. Classic macroeconomic theory is going to tell us that there's a relationship between the number of workers and the amount that they can get paid. It's just some ranking of workers, so there's some sort of relationship that looks like that. On the flip side of this, as the number of workers increases, the amount that can be paid is going to decrease. And in the absence of any policy setting what is fair to be paid, you're going to settle at some equilibrium point here. Now let's assume that we impose a minimum wage right here. Now that's going to tell us that this many people are going to want to work. Maybe we now have 4 of these theoretical workers, but businesses can only afford to pay this many. So what you end up with is unemployment. There's a lot of assumptions baked into this, but we don't have to just take this model as our view of the world. We can actually just look at data and figure it out. Part of what makes the US awesome is that our states are actually just a really loose collection of tiny little countries, a lot like Europe with the European Union. The states have incredible latitude to impose different economic ideas and see how it plays out. And that way the US is set up as sort of a socio-economic lab space where we can look and test ideas. As of 2025, 68% of all US states have elected to go with a state-level minimum wage that's higher than the federal minimum wage. What I want to explore is there more to know about this? Can we look at publicly available data and get a sense for what would be the economic fallout of raising the federal minimum wage? We're going to test the idea, the simple starting point, that per capita income is higher in tracts where states have imposed a higher minimum wage. We're going to start by using a very, very simple statistical test, and that's the 2-sample t-test. So let's assume we've got some variable. Let's say it's per capita income for some group A. We're going to draw a PDF of this, and we're going to assume it follows a normal distribution where the data is centered around some mean, call it mu A, and it's got some variance. Let's say we've got another group now. This group is also following a normal distribution. Say this is per capita income of group B. It's got its mean, and it also has a variance. We can see here that the means are certainly different. The mean of B is bigger than A, but if we just drew a random sample from population B, sometimes we're going to get a value of B that's less than A, and that's because they vary around their means. We can never know the means and the variances directly. We have to estimate them. And our estimator for the means are going to be the sample average, which is the summation of all our data points divided by the total number of data points. And we can also estimate our variances by using the summation of all our data points minus the average squared all over n minus 1. Once we have that, we can introduce the t-test statistic. This is the signal that we're looking for. This is the difference in sample averages. And down here is some big term that just describes the variance. This is the noise. So if we go back to this, we can see if there's a big difference in means and not much noise, we'll be easily able to see a difference. But if there's a lot of spread in these two variables, and the means are pretty close together, it's going to be harder to see a statistically significant difference. Let's do a numerical experiment. We're going to simulate two populations. Each have a mean per capita income of $50,000 US per year, and both have a standard deviation of $10,000. We're We're going to draw 100 random samples from each population and calculate the t-test statistic between the two. We're going to do this over and over and over again. And what we see on the right-hand side is the histogram under the null hypothesis, where the means are equal. We're not getting values more extreme than +3 or -3. And what this means is if we take our actual data and we calculate a t-test statistic more extreme than what we're seeing here, that we can reject the null hypothesis that the means are equal, and we can say there's a significant difference. So now let's just look at the data. This is the histogram of per capita income for all census tracts in states where they have greater than the federal minimum wage. This red histogram is showing the per capita income of all states that default back to the federal minimum wage. And if we run the two-sample t-test, we get a significant difference. So yeah, maybe there's something here, but we have a bit of a problem in that these data are not normally distributed, which is a big assumption of the two-sample t-test. A lot of environmental and socioeconomic data is going to violate this assumption. So instead, we're going to introduce the much more flexible Mann-Whitney U-Test, also called the rank sum test. Let's suppose we have two data sets, A and B, and we want to ask the question, are the medians of A and B equal to each other, or are they different? The first step is to take the two data sets, combine and then rank it. Once we have these rankings, we're going to compute the U statistic for column A. So U of A is equal to the sum of the ranks of A minus the number of A times the quantity number A plus 1 all over 2. We're going to do the same thing for B. We're going to take the smaller of those two values and consult a U-test statistic table. For large data sets, the distribution of U under the null hypothesis is approximately normally distributed. What we see is an increase in per capita income, a decrease in poverty, a decrease in the number of uninsured people, no real change in educational attainment, a slight increase in housing costs, and a slight increase in unemployment, as the basic economic model suggested. So it seems there's a slight net benefit. Per capita income goes up, poverty goes down. Unemployment, as expected, goes up a little bit. But the big takeaway for me is that both sides of this debate really need to chill out. There is not a really big signal of change for any of these variables. The changes in income and unemployment and poverty was small relative to the total socioeconomic variance across the US as a whole. So, have a good day.